it's Tarkhan back with another video. And I wanted to touch on something briefly here. This concept of revision that I've heard about a lot. I think I've touched on it in a few videos where I might have even said, hey, I wouldn't bother with revision so much because what you really want to focus on is creating what you want in the now, in the present moment. But I had a few other thoughts about this. I don't want to sort of dismiss the idea of revision altogether, but I wanted to clarify a little bit about it because it's important to understand when you're doing revision, when you're thinking about the past, even when you're worrying about the future. This is a very important point. You're doing it in the present moment. All right. You could have a memory and you could relive it in your mind like the day you were there. Okay. You can feel everything you felt that day that you were there. You can hear everything that was said, see everything that you saw in the way that you saw it, precisely as if you're reliving that day or that moment on that day. But remember, you're doing it right now. You're not actually traveling back in time because time is not linear anyway. You're not actually traveling back in time to go to that moment. You're recreating the moment in the present, which is an important concept to understand because, it's the same as if you're worrying about the future. Think about worrying about the future. You might go off into a daydream where you're imagining something terrible might happen to you in a month or two. All right. Maybe you're worried about that bill that's coming due or whatever it is. Okay. You're worrying about some travel plans or something. You're creating that in the moment. You're feeling that in the moment. Okay. So it's important to understand that with revision, with thinking about the future, all of that is happening right now, which is why we always say your point of attraction is always right now. Okay. So you're worrying about a future event. You're creating that future event for yourself in the moment. You're feeling it in the moment. So that's why it's so important to always focus on being in the moment and focus on what it is you're doing in the moment. What are you thinking about in the moment? What are you feeling about what you're thinking about in the moment? It's important to become aware of that, especially if you want to be an effective, deliberate manifester. Okay. This is a very big one to grasp, guys. So when we talk about revision, we want to understand that you're recreating a moment, but you're doing it in the present. Okay. So it doesn't matter about whether you're actually going back and changing that moment. What you're doing is you're changing your perception of that moment in the present to have a better perception of it. Okay. But you're doing so in the present. Now, here's something that I want to kind of go over with you a little bit. And I don't usually like doing this because I don't want to sit on camera and read things, but I'm going to read a little something because this is, sometimes I go through my notes and I have so many notes, and they're on my computer or on my phone and I go through them and, I might find something I wrote down, jotted down months and months ago, even years ago, where I was thinking about a certain thing in that moment. And of course, I'm bringing it back into the present moment. And I'm thinking about it again. So I'm kind of revising something that I wrote a long time ago, in the present moment. But this is actually notes that I jotted down from a video of a Bashar channeling that I was watching. And it really, really kind of grabbed me at the time. It still grabs me. So I want to go through some of this with you, and to kind of give you an idea of what I'm talking about. So, here's what Bashar says on the topic. And this is really, I think this really rings true to me, that the past is created from the present, not the other way around. Okay. So think about that, because in revision, what we tend to think we're doing is that we're recreating the past from the what we tend to think we're doing is we're going back to the past moment and recreating it, but we're actually creating it or recreating it from the present moment so that our perception of it changes in the now, in the present moment. So he talks a little bit about history. He talks about this in terms of, sort of mass manifestations, right? Collective manifestations. So he says history is not linear. It's holographic. When we choose a new collective parallel reality path into a different version of reality, we actually create a whole new history along with it to make sense of the new path. So what we think is history is always changing. So as we become a new society and a new people, we also create a new history to go along with that. We kind of have to, right? Because the past is created from the present, not the other way around. So last week even, we might have been on a path whose history dictated, all right, bear with me here, that JFK was assassinated in 1968 instead of 1963. This is getting a little woo-woo here, guys. Or another one even, we might have been on a path whose history dictated that JFK, or in another one where he was never assassinated at all and lived well into his 80s. So we've had many histories that we are now unaware of because every time we shift or change, we wipe the slate and create a new history that appears to be the only history we've ever had. Wow. And I put a bunch of emojis, mind blown emojis next to it because my mind was blown, I think, when I was hearing that. Several years ago, we had a whole different history than we have now, but we don't know it. We just live in a reality now where JFK was assassinated in 1963. Mind blown. So it is true for your personal history. So this is where it comes back around to your individual personal reality that you're always creating, and you're recreating it and redefining who you are billions of times per second. This is what Bashar always says. Every time you change and redefine yourself, you create a new history for yourself. Now, if it seems to be the same, it's because you have wiped the memory of the old history, and the new history must appear to be the only history there has ever been in order to make sense of the person you've defined yourself to be in the present. Now, this doesn't mean that you don't sometimes choose to recreate similar events over and over and over again every time you redefine yourself and create a similar personal history to some degree. So it doesn't have to always be something, as drastically different as JFK died in 68 or lived into his 80s as opposed to 1963. They can be very subtle changes, which is usually how these things happen. Even when we sort of choose new reality paths, as Bashar likes to put it, or we say we move into different parallel realities, we're doing it all the time, billions of times per second. They don't always have to look that drastically different from the previous reality path that we were on, right? They can be slightly different, okay? So this does happen because most of us have an agreement not to necessarily go too far in breaking the continuity of our mass consensus reality about what our history ought to be based on who we consider ourselves to be or define ourselves to be in the present. Nevertheless, this points out that we always, every single moment, have a choice to change our past as we change our present. So understand what he's saying here. We have a choice to change our past as we change our present. So as we change our present, our past changes automatically along with it. So the whole revision thing, it could be something interesting to engage in, right? And I'm not saying it's completely ineffective or completely, that you shouldn't do it, but understand what's happening when you're doing it. And this goes back to what I said before. You're changing it and revising it in the present. So what you're doing is you're changing your perspective about it in the present, and therefore changing who you are related to that event or that past event in the present moment. So you're becoming a different person. You're the one who's shifting all the time. And as you shift, so does the past, your personal past. And as we shift collectively, our collective past changes as well. It's about shifting your perspective. This is what I've always been saying on this channel, right? Let's hear that again. You have a choice to change your past as you change your present. So don't worry about changing the past necessarily. Change what you think about it in the present moment. Change how you perceive that event in the present moment. Change how you perceive yourself in the present moment. And that event changes for you. Okay? Now, it may seem subtle. You may not notice anything different right away. Again, like what 𝗙liche is saying, you may just completely forget the original perception you had of that past event and only embrace the new perception you have about it. You can turn a negative day in the past into a positive day, a negative experience into a positive experience for yourself in the moment. And that's what that event will be for you from now on. Okay? This is, again, this comes back to how we perceive reality in the now. We can revise present reality just as easily as we can revise past events. Okay? And it's really simple, guys. I mean, it's not that complicated. I can look at an event now and go, that sucked. I didn't like that. Or I could simply do a little exercise and say, well, what was good about that? What did I like about it? Was there anything positive about that event? And as I focus on those things, that event changes for me. The nature of that event changes for me. My perception of it changes, and therefore it changes. As I change, it changes. As I change my perception, it changes. Okay? The more we wrap our minds around this, the more we allow ourselves to understand how this world is structured more holographically. We have more opportunity to break that continuity more and more and more, and the breaking of that continuity will create more fluidity and flexibility within how we experience space and time, which means we will experience an increase in synchronicity. This is interesting, guys, because you keep wondering, I get a lot of questions about the numbers and the synchronicities. Here's what's going on. You're changing your perception of space and time in the present. Understanding more and more as you practice these things, as you practice this understanding of yourself as a manifester, as you practice the idea that time isn't really linear. Everything is always happening right now at the same time, concurrently. You are, in fact, going to experience more things like synchronicity. He talks about déjà vu, right? We might experience more things like déjà vu. This is an interesting one, which is experiencing the idea of the forward arrow of time and the backward arrow of time simultaneously. So I wanted to do this because one has the feeling in déjà vu that you know what's about to happen because it feels like it's already happened before, right? So you're getting both arrows of time simultaneously by expanding your consciousness to incorporate that idea. What this will mostly allow us to do really is to really understand this concept, is truly be more lucid in the physical reality dream. It's a dream we're in. And as we become more conscious of this idea, as we become more aware of just how powerful we are in creating our reality, meaning that we have the choice to tweak our perspective and our perception of things in our physical reality, past, present, or future, but always in the present, remember, we become more lucid. We start to see more synchronicities. We start to see more sort of, those Mandela effects too, right? I had one of those recently. Somebody famous died, and I could have sworn they were already dead, that they had died months ago. And then I went online, I went in some forums, and other people were saying that too. They're like, wait a minute, I thought that guy was already dead. Mandela effect, right? Strange things like this will start to happen to you. I'm sure all of you watching this have had some version of that already occurring in your lives. And you kind of go, what happened there? Whoa, that's weird. So we truly become more conscious about the kinds of choices we're making. As we do, the kinds of ways in which we define ourselves and what's true for us, and exactly what that does to the entire linear space-time reality when we do that. And it will give us more understanding of how we are experiencing our reality, because reality is just a projection. It's just a dream. And it's all about becoming more and more lucid in the physical dream. And then knowing more and more that we can bend the idea of space and time, because we can. Remember, we've all been trained to think that we can't our whole lives, right? We've had these systems in place and these educational systems in this society that we all at one point created collectively. But now these ideas are becoming obsolete. I think that's probably, I mean, my personal opinion, why we're seeing so much seeming chaos in the world right now. These are growing pains, okay? This is what happens when you shift from one sense of yourself to another sense of yourself. Those old systems have to drop away. They become obsolete. They no longer function. They no longer serve us. At some point, they served us. At some point, your negative belief about something served you. Okay, at some point, your ego adopted a belief that said, hey, I can't succeed. I shouldn't even try, because it was trying to protect you. And maybe at that time, in a sense, you were protected by that idea. But then you outgrow that idea. You outgrow that belief. But then, the belief still hangs around as you've shifted, as you've moved forward and expanded the idea of yourself. We feel pulled back by those old limiting beliefs. We have to let them go. And of course, the best way to do that, as I always say, is to begin to practice the new belief, the new idea. This is, in fact, where things like affirmations and repeating that can come in handy, okay? Because you practice that new idea. Even if at first your ego is like, your monkey mind's going, that's nonsense what you're saying. I am perfect health. I am wealthy. It's looking at the current physical reality and saying, well, that's not happening. You got to be persistent, okay? Because at some point, you will override that ego mentality. And then you begin to adopt the new idea. So where was I? Because we're actually doing it all the time anyway. It's just that we're becoming more conscious of the mechanism that we're using. I do believe we all are on some level collectively doing that, and individually. Well, as we do so individually, we do so collectively. That's what's going on in this transformational age. We're becoming more conscious of what we're already doing, what we've been doing all along, in other words. We're beginning to break through the veil and are seeing it all for the illusion that it is. We're actually all in spirit right now. It's just that we're dreaming that we're not. And I love what 𝗙liche says, you fell asleep in heaven. You're in heaven. You just fell asleep in heaven, and you're dreaming that you're not in heaven. That's what physical reality is. We have never left spirit. We can't leave spirit, but we can dream that we can. And we're sharing that dream together by agreeing to do so. And remember that we're redefining ourselves billions of times per second. Like I said before, billions of times per second all the time, like movie frames, okay? Boom, 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 boom. Each little frame of movement of my hand is a different parallel reality. And so, but of course, if we're going to live in this physical reality and be able to perceive it in a smooth way, it has to look like a film, right? So you run those frames very quickly against some light or something, and it has the illusion of being this smooth, uninterrupted sort of motion. All right? If you've ever experimented with certain alternative hippie-type substances in your life, you know what I mean, right? Those tracers. Think about that. Those are frames, okay? Our consciousness is slipping through billions of parallel reality frames per second. So at any given moment, we're always back to zero. We'll always have a clean slate. We always have the ability to redefine ourselves in whatever way is relevant for the theme we've chosen to explore. There's a lot of leeway in that. None of us are stuck in any way, shape, or form. So, to bring this back to the idea of revision, and maybe let's see if we can turn this into something more practical. I'm going to say it again. You don't need to really focus so much on revising the past. Now, you can do it if you want to really take a day in the past. Let's say it's related to your specific person. Maybe it's an ex, and you wish that day that you had that fight didn't happen, or that you had behaved differently, and you've convinced yourself that if you had, then the fight and the breakup would have never happened, and you wouldn't be in this quote-unquote predicament of trying to get them back and all this kind of stuff. You can go back to that day, let's say, all right? Let's use that as an example. You can redefine it, okay? But I would say my suggestion would be to always understand and always tell yourself that you're doing so in the present moment, because you don't want to go, and you're not changing the event in itself. You want to change who you are right now, and your perception of yourself in that moment, your perception of them in the moment, your perception of the whole event in the moment, okay? How might you do that? you can rewrite the scene, right? This is something that Neville talks about. You can rewrite the scene. You can just literally sit down and rewrite it. Write a script of the day turning out differently. Now, another way that you might do it is to think of things that happened that day that were good. You know, I can think of relationships where I had a big fight and a blow up, but it wasn't all that happened that day. It wasn't like the day was all bad. Okay. I could think of good things. I could think of us having a laugh over something or whatever it is. You can hyper focus on that, right? And in that way, cultivate a new feeling about that day or that event. That might be a little bit more difficult to do. But the revision part of it can really be effective, I think, if the scripting, in other words, you know, to revise the past. This is what Neville says. Again, I'm reading from my notes, guys. Sometimes my brain can't hold all the information, so this is an easier way to do it. To revise the past is to reconstruct it with new content. So you can add new content. Remember, you're not trying to go back in time in a time machine like Marty McFly or whatever, and, you know, you're gonna go and change everything. You know, it's not Groundhog Day, all right? It is a little bit like Groundhog Day, actually, because in your mind, you might be reliving the same day over and over again and think about, God, if only I had done things differently. What do I need to do differently? Well, you can do so now with this revision process, right? But again, I want to stress this. I'm going to say it again. It's about right now. It's about changing your perception right now. You're not physically traveling back in time. You're going to revise the moment and relive it or restructure it and live it in the now moment so that you can actually have a new perception about it and then finally let go of it. Okay? Man should daily relive the day as he wished he had lived it. Okay, Neville's saying do this daily. Well, I do it until it clicks, right? Revising the scenes to make them conform to his ideals. For instance, suppose today's mail brought disappointing news. Revise the letter. Mentally rewrite it. You can even physically rewrite it and make it conform to the news you wish you had received. Then, in imagination, read the revised letter over and over again, and this will arouse the feeling of naturalness. It's got to feel natural to you, right? So you're not boxing the thing. You're not trying to wrestle it into submission. It's got to feel natural to you. The imaginal acts become facts as soon as we feel natural in the act. And I think this is what the repetition is about and why Neville stresses the repetition so much. Do this again and again and again until it feels natural to you. All right. Because it's in the doing, in the practicing and the repetition part. And this is true for anything, guys. I mean, this is true for your affirmations, obviously. This is true for practicing anything within this manifesting process that we're studying. The more you do it, the easier it becomes, the more natural it becomes. It's like learning a new language. It's like learning an instrument. You're going to practice. Your fingers aren't going to feel comfortable on the piano at first, but eventually they will. Okay. The more you do it, the more you do it, the more you do it. It's the muscle memory that sets in. It's, you actually will have a different physical reaction to thinking about the event the more you revise the event. It's about practice, 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 practice until it becomes, it starts to feel natural to you. This is the essence of revision, and revision results in repeal. So here's an example, FB, and I think this is from the book, the Neville book that this is taken from. Again, I'm going through my notes. So I write things and I take things from books and I write them down so I don't always have the exact book or page number or whatever it is. But late in July, I wrote to a real estate agent of my desire to sell a piece of land, which had been a financial burden to me. His negative reply listed all the reasons why sales were at a standstill in that area, and he forecast a bleak period of waiting until after the first of the year. I received his letter on a Tuesday, and in my imagination, I rewrote it with words indicating that the agent was eager to take my listing. I read this revised letter over and over, and I extended my imaginal drama using your theme of the four mighty ones of our imagination. from your book, Seed Time and Harvest. So this is a Neville book, Seed Time and Harvest. So if you want to go check that out and read more about this, but he talks about the four mighty ones, the producer, the author, the director, and the actor. And I've talked about this before, where in anything that you're creating in your life in general, you are all of these things. You're the writer, the producer, the actor. This is your movie, right? This is the movie of your life. So you take on these different roles. You write the scene, you act it out. That means you feel like you're feeling it like an actor would in a movie. Takes on the role, takes on the character, the feeling of the character. This is what method actors do, right? Standing in the real estate office, I extended my hand to the agent and said, "Thank you, sir." And he replied, "It was a pleasure doing business with you." This is the revision. As director, I rehearsed myself as actor until the scene was vividly real, and I felt the relief which would be mine if the burden were really lifted. Relief. Remember, I've talked about this before too. Relief is a very important feeling. Once you've accomplished that feeling of relief, you know that whatever method you've been doing, whatever technique you've been doing, it was good. It was successful because you're feeling that sense of relief about it. Oh, it's happened. It's turned out the way that I wanted it to turn out. Even if it was only in your imagination, like Neville says, it's that feeling of relief that you want. That means you've let go of a lot of resistance. 3 days later, the agent I had originally written phoned me saying he had a deposit for my lot at the price I had specified. I signed the papers in his office the next day, extended my hand and said, "Thank you, sir." 5 days after I had constructed and enacted an imaginal scene, it became a physical reality and was played word for word, just as I heard it in my imagination. Word for word. How about that? The feeling of relief and joy came, not so much from selling the property, but from the incontrovertible proof that my imagined drama works. So, I don't need to say much more about it at this point because I don't want to overwhelm you and kind of, drone on and on about this, what's already becoming a half-hour video. But I wanted to really touch upon this idea of the revision because I want to, I get this a lot from people. And the thing about it is that, when I've said in the past, hey, don't worry so much about revision, what I was really responding to was this idea that people desperately want to try to revise a past moment because they think that's the only way for them to move forward. Okay. And I'm going to stress to you that it's not. All right. You don't have to do revision at all. Okay. You can simply, focus on your life right now. Focus on everything that's good about your life right now, that you appreciate about your life right now. If it's a specific person you want to be with, focus on what you appreciate about them right now. And you can construct scenes in your mind or script scenes, write them down, that reflect that way that you want to feel about the situation right now. But revision is a great way to do it. Okay. You can use the revision technique, but understand, again, I'm going to stress this again. You're doing it right now. You're doing it in the moment. Just like if you're worrying about a future event, you're doing it in the moment. This is how creation works. Okay. And remember what Bashar said. As you change your perception of yourself, you change the past event. It automatically changes. The new history automatically comes along with what you're creating in the present. That's an interesting idea. Now, you might, well, how do I know that's true, Tarkan? Because, according to Bashar, you're not going to remember the other history or the other version of it, right? That's okay. All right. But you might be fluid enough to understand that, but it's not really that important. The important thing is to understand that you're recreating your perception of the past event in the present moment, which means you're also recreating your perception of yourself, who you are now. And I say this again and again. Are you the version of yourself that worries about it, that stresses about it, that feels guilty about it, that thinks you messed up, that's always punishing yourself for that? Or are you the version of yourself that says, hey, I got this, it's all fine, everything's cool, I have it already in my pocket, it's already done, it's a done deal, I don't have to worry about it, I'm feeling that sense of relief about it, I'm going to get on with my life, I'm going to get on with my mission, I'm going to feel good, I'm going to do things I'm passionate about, I'm going to do things that I love. And all that stuff is already worked out. And the more I get out of the way of it, that means the less resistance I offer to it, the more it starts to come together for me in my physical reality. Okay? So I hope that helps you guys. I hope that cleared some things up about revision. And I didn't babble too much about it, and confuse you. Sometimes I think I do. So thank you for watching. I really appreciate you watching. I appreciate all of you who have subscribed, and I would appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. I appreciate all your donations. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing this video with anyone you think might benefit from it. And I just appreciate you. So until next time, guys, this is Tarkan. And until then, happy manifesting and bye-bye.